Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell. I'm a doula in Washoe County, Nevada, a Medicaid provider, a lactation educator, childbirth educator, and mom of 18. You can find me and connect on doulainreno.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive in. Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm the host, Jennifer Campbell, and today I'm on with Alara Sage. And I didn't ask you to make sure I pronounced your name right, so I'm guessing that I did okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yay. I want you to jump in and tell me about your parenting journey.
Yes. So I have an interesting journey because I wasn't like most women or most mothers where I was just, desiring children all my life. I didn't want kids. In fact, I said for a very large portion of my, teenagehood, early 20s, early 30s, that I would not, I would never have children, which I've learned to never say never because I've literally done everything that I said I would never do.
Yes, probably me too.
So, and then it just hit me one day. My husband at the time, we were visiting his family, and his mom wanted us to help him organize some photos, and they were photos of him as a baby. And I got hit so hard with this just deep desire to have children. And it wasn't easy for me because of, well, the energetic distortion, the beliefs that created the I don't ever want kids really, was my inner child, of course. And my inability to feel really safe in the energy of playfulness and curiosity.
Mm.
When I was ever around little kids, I kind of like froze. It was like, I don't know what to do with you. Which is interesting because I loved animals. But
Oh,
I just felt like there was nothing, there was no requirement from me to animals. Like I could just be me.
yeah. And you can
And
put them in a kennel too, which, like it is different. It's really different. So,
yeah.
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 Okay.
I think for me, it was like the expectation that I felt like I had
Yeah.
to be like, playful with kids, and I didn't know how to access that energy. Whereas
Mm.
animals, I could just be whatever, and they just totally were good. Not that kids were judging me. That was just my personal
Yeah.
subconscious belief. So, yeah, when I first had kids, I didn't have this. I mean, when I was pregnant, I despised it.
Okay.
Um, and it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I'm pregnant. I'm so happy. This is so wonderful. I was like, oh, this is impeding my life, the things that I love to do. It drove me nuts. I've never been a type of person who's enjoyed people telling me what I can't do. So when you're pregnant and everybody's telling you you can't do this and you can't do that, and you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that, I was like, wow, oh my God, like this is just not enjoyable. That was mainly my first pregnancy. My second pregnancy, I had already moved through a lot of the energies, so I felt much more present with it. But I think it's important to say these things because I think that there's always this projection of, oh, everybody's just so happy and thrilled when they're pregnant, or becoming a mother. And when I first had my children, I felt that motherly love and that motherly instinct, but it wasn't a level of connection that I now have with my children after doing a lot of the internal work with my own inner child. The beauty of having children is that we get to raise ourselves over again, don't we? And
Yeah.
yeah, it brought a lot of awareness to myself around those matters.
I think you're right as far as it's very important to talk about. I got pregnant. I was happy that I was pregnant, but I was violently ill for like 20 weeks. I had IVs every single week. I was miserable and could hardly function. And I'm like,
Mm.
like super not enjoyable. Super not
Hmm.
enjoyable. It has nothing to do with how excited I was about the child,
Yes, exactly.
but it
Yes.
was really, really hard. And I think it's much more common, as a doula, I'm working with women. It's much more common. Women have this expectation of, they put the baby on your chest and instantly it's like, bing, you're hit with this
Hmm.
amazing feeling. And although that does happen often, it's also not uncommon that it doesn't happen, or it happens, but then it's like, now what? And we don't have that connection, or we have a hard time. And I do love that you said that we raised ourselves. I don't think we realize that that's going to happen. And
Yeah, it's
it does
powerful.
almost every time. You, on your website, it talks about how you like left at 19. And I'm wondering how, like, you left the country and you traveled the world because your intuition told you to, which is not how probably most people graduating high school, in my experience, we're not like, I have another plan. I'm going to go travel the country. I'm going to travel the world. What what was that like, and how much did that, I think in all of our lives we have these little, like, something drops in, right? And we don't necessarily recognize it in the moment always, but it makes a significant difference in the trajectory. So I guess I'm kind of wondering, like, from that attitude and desire, how did that change things moving forward for you?
Yeah, it's so funny. I was literally talking about this today because what was happening is at 19 years of age, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was taking on the projections of society that in 1999, the year that I graduated, they were saying, become a computer programmer. Everything's going to computers. That's where you're going to be successful. That's where you're going to like have easy careers. And I was headed in that. I was like, great, computer programmer. That's what I'll be. And my mother was like, what? You want to do what? And I pursued it. I went after college to become one. And I was a straight A student. I took AP classes. I
Mhm.
excelled in school, and I kept getting 10 points off of the SAT test because it was not the direction I was meant to go. And
Mhm.
it was the third time after I'd taken it that my higher self came in and was like, no, this is not what you're doing. You're gonna go and travel. And it just came out of my mouth. I said it as if I'd been thinking about it, but I hadn't been. And it's so important because I would have taken on this whole other persona, this whole other desire. Well, it wasn't
Mhm.
my desire. I would have taken on this career that had nothing to do with my actual wants or
Mhm.
needs and who I was innately. And I was really blessed to have been so connected to my higher self and be rerouted and live this life where I was teaching scuba diving, living on tropical islands, like traveling wherever I wanted to go, and I learned so much about myself, my ability to really create my life out in the world, by myself, away from my parents. It was incredibly liberating and one of the most powerful experiences I've had to this day.
Wow. Let's talk about, I know you didn't want, I love the story about how you were convinced you didn't want children, and then looking at that photo book, which, like, how unexpectedly bizarre is that? And you wanted children and you didn't love being pregnant. Where did your entrepreneurial journey start, and how much has it, like, we're all evolving constantly. It's not static, it's very fluid. Um I could be a doula forever, but stuff's going to change,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So how did that happen, and put things in order for me with having kids, and then I want to go into the kids and feeling that connection. I really want to dive into that.
Yeah, so I was an entrepreneur before I had children. And I at the time I was doing physical therapy on horses. So I did
Oh,
physical
wow.
therapy to horses. And so I traveled to the horses and it was a very physical job. And horses for the most part are very, very gentile creatures, but I'm literally working on sore spots in their bodies. So sometimes they would kick out or attempt to bite me because I was touching their pain. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it wasn't the easiest job to be pregnant in. Um, and then I really wanted to stay with both of my boys a year when both of them were newborns, stay with them for
Mm-hmm.
a year before I went back into. So, there for a little while, I took on another position that I could take my kids with me. And it was really challenging for me. I'm a very independent person. And I've always really applied myself. And I mean, I applied myself to the position I was given because I apply myself to everything, but it didn't feel like my application of me, right? Like I was applying myself for somebody else after being an entrepreneur. That feels very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very, very grateful for having that position, because I was able to bring my kids to work, and he was a great boss. But I really felt like, as I think many moms do, in that little period of time, as both my boys were quite young, the loss of myself to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And where am I and who am I? And then, I was able to regain back into my business and that kind of personal passion of myself that I think is so important for mothers, and again, only that span of time wasn't very long. It was, 2 years, maybe three max. And then I was able to really come back into my business and pursue that and kind of, okay, reestablish that sense of self. But I just really believe that that is so important, that mothers continue to reaffirm who they are individually in their unique self outside of their, identification with themselves as mothers.
I agree. And I think it happens to every one of us. Unless you're very, very self-aware beforehand, the change that you go through in becoming a mother is so significant. And like your body's healing emotionally, hormonally, there are all these things going on. Nothing looks or feels the same in your body, physically or emotionally. And it's so easy to lose yourself in that process and not remember like what things. I ask women, what did you like to do before you had kids? Like that's a great
Mm,
place to start. It's not
hmm.
always what you go back to, but
Absolutely.
it's a
Yeah.
great place to start with, like, how do you move forward and figure out who you are in all of this? So I love you had more self-awareness in the moment than I think a lot of women do. How did you go through that well, first of all, you mentioned having trouble connecting with the boys too. Like you feel that initial thing, but then you don't. So there's connecting with the boys. How far apart were they in age?
About 18 months.
Okay. Which a lot of us do. So it's like your body goes through a lot in a short period of time. You have two children in a short period of time.
Mhm.
So how did you reconnect with them? And then how did you recognize and rectify, look at those words, wow, that you weren't feeling like yourself and you needed that. You needed to get back to who you were.
Mm. Yeah, I was really aware of it. I was
Yeah.
aware of the feeling going in. And, I was also aware of the feeling of disconnection, and that ultimately came from my mother and my relationship with my mother. So
Mhm.
I was very self-aware. And so I was able to move into all of it with that awareness of, I can see where I brought this, I brought on this pattern of disconnection from my mother. And now that I've chosen to have children, I'm choosing to rewrite that.
Yes.
I'll hold space for myself. I'll hold space for the fact that this is how I truly feel. I feel
Mhm.
disconnected. I felt very protective, very motherly in so many ways, but also this level of disconnect that my mother had reflected to me. And just
Mhm.
the continuous, like, and I'm going to work to resolve that, as is the same thing as, my mother. She would often say things like, oh, I did all this for you guys, and I did all, I gave up things for you guys. And so that was another thing I was self-aware of, that yes, I'm going to come into this because I desire to be a mother, and I'm not going to let myself slip in that I'm giving away my own personal desires, my pursuits, my goals, what I want for myself in this life, just because I've become a mother.
Yeah, and that's so hard to balance because um I feel like, sometimes balancing what we need and what we want as just me, the person, and doing everything I can for my kids. That's sometimes it's really hard to balance that out a little bit. I find, and it changes as they get older, and it changes because of their personality, and it changes because of your life. But I mean, if we could all be that self-aware while we're in the midst of it. I think a lot of women get so caught up in it and then they kind of hit a wall, and that's if they're forced to acknowledge that it's going on. So I love that. When did you you took a different role as an entrepreneur, but then obviously, because I'm on your website, things have shifted. And I definitely want to get into that. That is like, I have selfish personal reasons to ask you questions,
Love
as
it.
don't we all?
Those are always the
Um,
best.
yeah, those are the best. So, can I read something and we'll launch in a completely different trajectory?
Absolutely.
You say on your website in 2013, I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening where Shakti energy, creative life force energy, shot through my body, out of my crown, and I went into full body orgasm. I'd never had a full body orgasms, let alone one while driving my car, which of course I was like, I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure I've had a full body orgasm. Unless like you can really prove to me that it wasn't, I am pretty sure that I have. But, and you say it's taught me what I was capable of. And I think one thing, even if I haven't, when you've had those really intense, feels like your whole body's involved orgasm, like my goal is like, let's do that again. But you were driving your car. So I want to like obviously your business is not helping horses where they hurt. Let's switch gears and like everybody, all the moms put on headphones. We're talking sex, my favorite topic. So tell me about this experience. Like, obviously, there's a gap here somewhere from connecting with your boys and yourself to full body orgasm in my car.
No, I can totally bridge the gap because,
Yes.
I was shut down and I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of it. I was numb and I was shut down. I was shut down emotionally. I had had a lot of, I had sexual trauma when I was a child. I had some trauma with friends and women. And so really shut myself down. I'd put a lot of protective barriers up. And that was really what I say when I say I wasn't connected to my inner child. And therefore I was like resistant to kids, is from all of that, those barriers, those protective walls. And so at the time that experience happened, I was working on the horses. Um, and
Okay.
I was actually driving to go work on one of the horses when it happened.
Who knew?
And yeah, I mean, it was just such a radical experience because at the time for me, sex wasn't even enjoyable, even though I was very sexual. Like I wanted sex. I always loved like the idea of it. And then always in the act of it, it was like, isn't this supposed to feel good? And regular, just bodily localized orgasm was very challenging for me. I had to really concentrate. It was very mentalized. And, if everything was just perfect, it would happen. So that which happened in the car with my Shakti was just totally out of the box for me. But then that's exactly what it did. It showed me like, oh, like, I'm not broken. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing like I there for a while I just was like, well, I guess this is just who I am. I just don't get to have fun sexually, and that's where it proved me wrong and it plummeted me. I mean, that was such a transformational experience for me. And it was just the beginning, Yes, I woke up to this very blissful, ecstatic energy, but it also released this suppressed emotional energy that I'd been suppressing my whole life. It all came rip roaring out. And I had fun 5 months of, I even asked my higher self like 3 times, am I going crazy? Because the emotional energy was so chaotic. Um,
Mm.
and it just blew me open. And, I still had a lot to learn from that point. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, you just got blown open. I was like, no, that was just the beginning, sweetheart.
Yeah.
Just the beginning of the
Peeking Pandora's box,
realization.
just a
Yes.
peek.
Yes. It was not just like, okay, then I was all blissful and
Check.
orgasmic after that. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
if only. I mean, but so what instigated this experience? Any Was it just completely out of the blue, no idea, driving your car, bam?
Yeah. So I was meditating every single day. At that
Okay.
point, I was spiritual. But yes, it was spontaneous. And I've
Wow.
had many of these types of experiences spiritually, awakenings, these experiences that just come out of the blue. They're divinely orchestrated per my higher self, but they are spontaneous. Yes. And, there's exactness in divine orchestration. It's precise, it's precision. Nothing is coincidental. But from the perspective, I was not practicing Kundalini Shakti.
Mhm.
I was not even practicing. It happened because my higher self told me to om. I wasn't oming. None of that was, I wasn't trying to get this to happen. I didn't even actually know what happened to me when it happened.
Yeah. I mean, so it changed some trajectory for you. It changed a lot. And I want you to talk about the change in, because like you said, it was you were peaking. It was not like you didn't arrive. It was a journey. And then things happened from then until 2021. So I would love you to fill in the gaps between the car, and I'd be like, "I need to go for a drive. I'm gonna go for a drive." Like,
An ohm.
I'm gonna drive
Oh.
every day. I just need to go drive. Why are you sitting in the car in the garage? I just need to be in my car. Because there is some ecstatic joy to that, and realizing that your body's capable of doing something that you wanted, that you didn't even realize, and then it happens. And I know in myself, I would want to try to recapture that. So the things happen and change from that moment until 2021. Can you bridge that gap, and anything that's happening in your connection with your kids too? Because this is, like you said, it's blowing you open in a much different way. So relationships with family and the kid's dad, and I it could have been making lots of changes in there.
Yeah, I mean, my entire world was flipped upside down. So I divorced my husband.
Okay, did
Um,
not see that one coming, but yes,
yeah,
okay.
and we have a really great relationship to this day. We're a great team. I love him dearly. I have deep respect. He wasn't an issue or a problem or anything like that. Um, and I was evolving so quickly, and there was just a real knowing in me that I needed to go off onto my own. And at that same time, I was evolving into animal communication because it was just happening to me. The animals and horses were just talking to me. And so I evolved into animal communication and doing sessions over the phone, which was much better for being a single mother
Mm,
and not having to drive to the horses and just my natural income ability. And yeah, it I already started to connect much more to my inner child and to my emotions. I didn't honestly really feel comfortable around emotions. And
mm.
my boys were, going into their terrible twos around this time, their threes, all of that. And I was able to really hold a very good container of like, yeah, get it out, sweetheart. Cause I just went through that. Like, I understand.
Yeah.
Get it out. Like, please scream, yell, do whatever you gotta do. So it was already opening me to do different than what I had been
Yeah.
taught. There hadn't been space for my emotions when I was a kid. There hadn't been space for my expression. So I had learned to shut that all down. I mean, just even the fact that we call it the terrible twos says so much about how we perceive beings coming into their emotional body, because that's what's happening. We're becoming connected to our emotions. We're being able to express them. And, our society's been like, wow, don't do that. Stop. That's too much. So already I was really opening up in my ways to really support my boys on a much deeper level. But all around, honestly, like for instance, one of the things that comes to me is I've always loved dancing, but
Mhm.
I never felt safe doing it. I'd have to get drunk to dance, and I wasn't a drinker. So that meant that I never got to dance except for the rare occasion. And when I danced, I loved it.
Mm.
And this whole experience was such an opening that I just started dancing again, and without any alcohol, which
Wow.
I'd never done my whole life. I'd never done that. But I just was giving myself permission. And of course, my boys would be dancing with me, and just started really feeling my voice opened up. I started, speaking up to my parents about what I needed, how I felt, all the things of just really like I need to do this for myself. This is me taking on my power for my life, and including my children as part of it. And my children saw me go through all of the emotions. They saw me, I was very scared. It wasn't an easy journey. I left so much. We had a beautiful home. We had the perfect life, right? Like there was so much structure and support that I had to then leave and step out of. And that was scary.
Yeah.
And, my boys, I was very honest with them. They were little, but I always expressed to them and would cry in front of them and tell them it's okay. I'm okay. I just need to cry, and they really witnessed all of this with me and they were a part of it with me. And that created such a strong bond between us.
That's amazing. I think that, there was one time one of my kids, I always call her like the tender, sweet young thing. She was shy and sweet and had some anxiety, and she was little, and she said, Mommy, I said, it's okay to cry. And she said, but you never cry. And I realized that I was trying to be so strong
Mm,
for my kids that I never broke down in front of them because I felt like I had to I didn't want them to think I was letting them down. Like I just had to be strong for them. And like that moment I was like, holy cow, what a disservice
yeah.
without even
Right.
realizing it, feeling like
Yeah.
you're doing the right thing and inadvertently completely doing the wrong thing. And I told her, she was probably 4 or 5. Like, "No, mommy cries a lot. I cry mostly in the shower because I don't want it to scare you and I don't want you to be worried for me." But what a lesson, that your kids need to see all of that because
Yeah.
otherwise they think there's something wrong with them for expressing emotions that you don't allow yourself to show in front of them. So, it's fascinating. You do raise yourself. I mean, so you somehow switched to are you still working with animals?
No, so then one day my higher self came, my animal communication career was very short,
Okay.
because my psychic abilities just took off. And higher self came to me one day and said, "You're going to start working with people." And I was like, "No, higher self, I'm okay. I'll stick with the animals." And it just started happening. Every phone call I got, like, "Hey, my dog," all of the energy would go to the person. I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Wow." And it was true though. Like I had this woman who was like, "My dog just keeps barking. I don't know. It never used to do this." And I was like, "There's something that you're not expressing to your husband." And she was like, "Oh, yeah, that's right." And then she like wrote to me 2 weeks later that she told her husband what she needed to say to him, and her dog stopped barking. And like, but yeah, it was like it was not. There was no more. It was done. I couldn't continue to call myself animal communicator because like honestly, everything was showing up for the people and not for the dogs. So then I started opening at my business for like readings, and then it went into healing. And it's just, I mean, I've gone on such a rapid fire journey through all of this, all guided by higher self.
Then talk to me, you talk a little bit on the website about 2021 and that experience and how it's changed you. And like I know I've read it, so I know that something happened. I know what happened. But can you talk a little bit more in depth? I think women, well, everyone who's in business, if you just do this, you'll arrive. If you just do this, it will be enough. If you just do this, we push ourselves to meet some sort of standard that we've arbitrarily set for ourselves. And when we're forced to not be able to do that, like you have to stop and take a look, right? So, can you explain in a little bit more detail what happened with you?
Yeah. So prior to it was in November of 2021. I had a six-figure business and everything was coming very easily. And simultaneously, I wasn't really owning my unworthiness, the unworthiness, the inadequacy I had, first and foremost, just in and of myself. That energy is located in our wombs, um, and particularly around money. And so I had money, I was making good
Mm,
money, and yet I was being irresponsible with it. My relationship with it wasn't good. And I was just denying it all because I had it. And then higher self started to warn me that first higher self said, pay off your credit cards, which ironically enough, I always did. And all of a
mhm.
sudden I found myself not doing. And I started like putting on these brakes and like, no, wait. Cause there's a part of myself that already knew it was going to happen. And so I was like putting on these brakes and like, no, just wait. And higher self was like, pay off your credit cards. And I said, yeah, I will, higher self. Let me just. And then about a week before the event happened, I was in meditation and higher self said, there's a karmic debt. And I felt it very energetically. It was very, very big. And I said, I desire to balance this karmic energy. And that's when higher self said, okay, like that'll be done. And I didn't know it would happen. So I had no idea. I I didn't really know what I was signing. I did know what I was signing up for, and then simultaneously, I didn't really know what I was signing up for. I knew it was karmic. I knew it had to do with money. I didn't expect all of my money to be stolen a week later. So, like, I knew what I was signing up for, but then simultaneously, it still hit me. And so, yeah, a week later, all my money was stolen, and then I found myself in debt because I hadn't paid off my credit cards. And, I went through a very quick moment of fear. And I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
got this. Like, I've been able to create all kinds of things in my life. Um,
Okay.
I believe very strongly that we create our reality. So I was like, I got this. And I set about, doing all of the energy things that I knew to do to create my reality. And instead of creating more wealth, my business absolutely crumbled. And I mean, it just like imploded in itself. And I kept trying to just do the energetic practices that I knew. But again, I was still in denial of the distortions, energetic distortions I was carrying.
Okay.
And through the crumbling, I was pulled into it. And I held a great amount of shame in my body around my sexual energy,
Mm.
around money, around my power. And those are not separate. Sex, money, power are all the same. I didn't know that at the time.
Okay.
So I was taken deep into my body through meditation, through energy work, into my cervix, into my G spot. I found all of this past life trauma, trauma of this life. At one point, I was working in my cervix and I was connecting to a past life where I was a sex slave as a harem for some level of royalty. And my mother was in that life with me. She wasn't my mother. She was just another woman. We weren't related, but she was in the harem and we were good friends. And while I was working through this energy in my cervix, it took me about 2 weeks. My father calls me and I have a good relationship with my parents at this time, but we don't talk regularly. My dad goes, I need to tell you something. And I said, yeah, what? And he said, your mother's been diagnosed with cervical cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know she was sick because it's a very, intense. And I was like, yeah, I know exactly why, you know. And now she's in remission because we've been healing it and we did the healing work that needed to be resolved. But yeah, and all of that, the whole, I found, I mean, that was the reason sex was never felt good to me. I had all of these energies in my body. My G spot felt like sandpaper. I didn't even realize that's not what it's supposed to feel like. And all of this came rip roaring out and just the real core wounding of unworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that took me several years of really going through those energies to start to flip it back around. But I'm so grateful. I mean, I really mean it when I say that because everything I was building was on very unstable ground.
Mm.
Sure, I was six figure, but I was shaking. I was building it off of the energy of unworthiness and shame. So the fact that I got to tear it all down
Mm-hmm.
and, I've been with a partner for 4 years and, him and I have a really wonderful relationship and he's really helped me through all of this. And now recreate it in a true energy of my own power, my sexual power, and a place of worthiness, that is indescribable.
Shame, I think, is the word. I'm an NLP practitioner, and you go through like anger, fear, guilt, but shame's not one of the main five. And I'm like, man, I think that always needs to be tacked on. And I don't know if it's a predominantly female thing, but it is crazy how much I think shame comes up and we just stuff it down and don't acknowledge it. But I love when you said, I'm like, yeah, when things are off with my business, I know they're going to be off personally and I know they're going to be off sexually. Like when you're like, they're connected, I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, every single
Mhm.
time something's off in one, you can see it in all.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I know they're connected. So I love that you said that. Tell me about, how old are your kids now?
9 and 11.
All right. So I was kind of keeping track, but I knew it was like 8, 7, 8. Awesome. Okay, so time has passed. I want you to tell people what you do for them now. I love that you are so grateful that things were ripped down and rebuilt in a space without shame. I love that, because how great would it be if we could all come from that space? I want you to tell them what you offer, and the best way to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so now I've always done this. I've always, since I've worked with people, and been in the business that I am now, help people, men and women, to create what they desire. And I specifically work with women, to conceive babies because,
Mm.
believe it or not, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I really like blowing through a lot of the myths and the disbeliefs and the things about we have to do it externally or we have to do these labs or all of that, when it doesn't matter. It's all fundamentally the same thing, no matter what you're creating. Um, and so it's really my passion of helping people to really know their power to create their reality and watch it unfold for them. And, even when we're going to create babies, right? Like, we go on this journey that I teach my clients, and their entire reality shifts. They don't just get pregnant. Their relationships improve, right? Like, just kind of like we were talking about, everything opens
Yes.
up for them. And that's the beauty of this kind of work and pursuing our desires. And so that's basically what I do. And yeah, people can find me. My website is alarasage.com. I'm on Instagram, Alara Sage, Facebook, Alara Sage.
Where I stalk you everywhere. Alara, thank you so much for being on and sharing. What it was a really fun, wild ride. I really enjoyed chatting with you. This was a blast. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you. This was a really unique conversation. I really enjoyed touching all those points, so I enjoyed it.